females of most mammal species, that degree of male underdevelopment varies among species. At the one extreme, in male mice and rats, the mammary tissue never forms ducts, or a nipple, and remains invisible from the outside. At the opposite extreme, in dogs and primates, including humans, the gland does form ducts, and a nipple in both males and females, and scarcely differs between the sexes before puberty. Chapter 3. Why don't men breastfeed their babies? The non-evolution of male lactation. Section 2. During adolescence, the visible differences between the mammalian sexes increase under the influence of a mix of hormones from the gonads, adrenal glands, and pituitary gland. Hormones released in pregnant and lactating females produce a further mammary growth spurt and start milk production, which is then reflexively stimulated by nursing. In humans, milk production is especially under the control of the hormone prolactin, while the responsible hormones in cows include somatotropin, alias growth hormone, the hormone behind the current debate over proposed hormonal stimulation of milk cows. It should be emphasized that male/female differences in hormones aren't absolute, but a matter of degree. One sex may have higher concentrations and more receptors for a particular hormone. In particular, becoming pregnant is not the only way to acquire the hormones necessary for breast growth and milk production. For instance, normally circulating hormones stimulate a milk production, termed witch's milk, in newborns of several mammal species. Direct injection of the hormones estrogen or progesterone, normally released during pregnancy, triggers breast growth and milk production in virgin female cows and goats, and also in steers, male goats, and male guinea pigs. The HO hormonally treated virgin cows produced on the average as much milk as their half-sisters that were nursing calves to which they had given birth. Granted, hormonally treated steers produced much less milk than virgin cows. You shouldn't count on steer's milk in the supermarkets by next Christmas. But that's not surprising since the steers have previously limited their options. They haven't developed an udder to accommodate all the mammary gland tissue that hormonally treated virgin cows can accommodate. There are numerous conditions under which injected or topically applied hormones have produced inappropriate breast development and milk secretion in humans, both in men and in non-pregnant or non-nursing women. Men and women cancer patients being treated with estrogen proceeded to secrete milk when injected with prolactin. Among such patients was a 64-year-old man who continued to produce milk for 7 years after hormonal treatment was discontinued. This observation was made in the 1940s, long before the regulation of medical research by human subjects protection committees, which now forbid such experiments. Inappropriate lactation has been observed in people taking tranquilizers that influence the hypothalamus, which controls the pituitary gland, the source of prolactin. It also has been observed in people recovering from surgery that stimulated nerves related to the suckling reflex, as well as in some women on prolonged courses of estrogen and progesterone birth control pills. My favorite case is the chauvinist husband, who kept complaining about his wife's miserable little breasts, until he was shocked to find his own breasts growing. It turned out that his wife had been lavishly applying estrogen cream to her breasts to stimulate the growth craved by her husband, and the cream had been rubbing off on him. At this point, you may be starting to wonder whether all these examples are irrelevant to the possibility of normal male lactation, since they involve medical interventions such as hormone injections or surgery. But inappropriate lactation can occur without high-tech medical procedures. Mere repeated mechanical stimulation of the nipples suffices to trigger milk secretion in virgin females of several mammal species, including humans. Mechanical stimulation is a natural way of releasing hormones by means of nerve reflexes connecting the nipples to hormone-releasing glands via the central nervous system. For instance, a sexually mature but virgin female marsupial can regularly be stimulated to lactate just by fostering another mother's young onto her teats. The milking of virgin female goats similarly triggers them to lactate. That principle might be transferable to men, since manual stimulation of the nipples causes a prolactin surge in men as well as in non-lactating women. Lactation is not an infrequent result of nipple self-stimulation in teenage boys. My favorite human example of this phenomenon comes from a letter to the widely syndicated newspaper column Dear Abby. An unmarried woman about to adopt a newborn infant longed to nurse the infant, and asked Abby whether taking hormones would help her to do so. Abby's reply was, "Preposterous, you'll only make yourself sprout hair." Several indignant readers then wrote in to describe cases of women in similar situations who succeeded in nursing an infant by repeatedly placing it at the breast. Recent experience of physicians and nurse lactation specialists now suggest that most adoptive mothers can begin producing some milk within 3 or 4 weeks. The recommended preparation for prospective adoptive mothers is to use a breast pump every few hours to simulate sucking, beginning about a month before the expected delivery of the birth mother. Long before the advent of modern breast pumps, the same result was achieved by repeatedly putting a puppy or a human infant to the breast. Such preparation was practiced especially in traditional societies, when a pregnant woman was sickly and her own mother wanted to be ready to step in and nurse the infant in case the daughter proved unable to do so. The reported examples include grandmothers up to the age of 71, as well as Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi, in the Old Testament. If you don't believe it, open a Bible and turn to the book of Ruth, chapter 4, verse 16. Breast development occurs commonly, and spontaneous lactation occasionally, in men recovering from starvation. Thousands of cases were recorded in prisoners of war released from concentration camps after World War II. One observer noted 500 cases in survivors of one Japanese POW camp alone. The likely explanation is that starvation inhibits not only the glands that produce hormones, but also the liver, which destroys those hormones. The glands recover much faster than the liver when normal nutrition is resumed, so that hormone levels soar unchecked. Again, turn to the Bible to discover how Old Testament patriarchs anticipated modern physiologists. Job, chapter 21, verse 24, remarked of a well-fed man that his breasts are full of milk. It has been known for a long time that many otherwise perfectly normal male goats with normal testes and proven ability to inseminate females surprise their owners by spontaneously growing udders and secreting milk. Billy goat milk is similar in composition to she-goat milk, but has even higher fat and protein content. Spontaneous lactation has also been observed in a captive monkey, the stump-tailed macaque of Southeast Asia. In 1994, spontaneous male lactation was at last reported in males of a wild animal species, the dayak fruit bat of Malaysia, and adjacent islands. 11 adult males captured alive proved to have functional mammary glands that yielded milk when manually expressed. Some of the males' mammary glands were distended with milk, suggesting that they had not been suckled, and, as a result, milk had accumulated. However, others may have been suckled because they had less distended, but still functional, glands, as in lactating females. Among 3 samples of dayak fruit bats caught at different places and seasons, 2 included lactating males, lactating females, and pregnant females, but adults of both sexes, in the 3rd sample, were reproductively inactive. This suggests that male lactation in these bats may develop along with female lactation as part of the natural reproductive cycle. Microscopic examination of the testes revealed apparently normal sperm development in the lactating males. Thus, while usually mothers lact and fathers don't, males of at least some mammal species have much of the necessary anatomical equipment, physiological potential, and hormone receptors. Males treated either with the hormones themselves or with other agents likely to release hormones may undergo breast development and some lactation. There are several reports of apparently normal adult men nursing babies. One such man, whose milk was analyzed, secreted milk sugar, protein, and electrolytes at levels similar to those of mother's milk. All these facts suggest that it would have been easy for male lactation to evolve, perhaps it would have required just a few mutations causing increased release or decreased breakdown of hormones. Evidently, evolution just didn't design men to utilize that physiological potential under normal conditions. In computing terminology, at least some males have the hardware. We merely haven't been programmed by natural selection to use it. Why not? To understand why, we need to switch from physiological reasoning, which we have been using throughout this chapter, back to the evolutionary reasoning that we were using in Chapter 2. In particular, recall how the evolutionary battle of the sexes has resulted in parental care being provided by the mother alone in about 90% of all mammal species. For those species in which offspring will survive with zero paternal care, it's obvious that the question of male lactation never arises. Not only do males of those species have no need to lactate, they also don't have to bring food, defend a family territory, defend or teach their offspring, or do anything else for their offspring. The male's crass genetic interests are best served by chasing other females to impregnate. A noble male carrying a mutation to nurse his offspring, or to care for them in any other way, would quickly be outbred by selfish normal males that forewent lactation, and thereby became able to sire more offspring. Only for those 10% of mammal species in which male parental care is necessary does the question of male lactation even deserve consideration. Those minority species include lions, wolves, gibbons, marmosets, and humans. But even in those species requiring male parenting, lactation isn't necessarily the most valuable form that the father's contribution can take. What a big lion really must do is to drive off hyenas and other big lions bent on killing his cubs. He should be out patrolling his territory, not sitting home nursing the cubs, which the smaller lioness is perfectly capable of doing, while his cubs' enemies are sneaking up. The wolf father may make his most useful contribution by leaving the den to hunt, bringing back meat to the wolf mother, and letting her turn the meat into milk. The gibbon father may contribute best by looking out for pythons and eagles that might grab his offspring, and by vigilantly expelling other gibbons from the fruit trees in which his spouse and offspring are feeding, while marmoset fathers spend much time carrying their twin offspring. Chapter 3. Why don't men breastfeed their babies? The non-evolution of male lactation. Section 3. All these excuses for male non-lactation still leave open the possibility that some other mammal species could exist in which male lactation might be advantageous to the male and his offspring. The dyak fruit bat may turn out to be such a species. But even if there are mammal species for which male lactation would be advantageous, its realization runs up against problems posed by the phenomenon termed evolutionary commitment. The idea behind evolutionary commitment can be understood by analogy to devices manufactured by humans. A manufacturer of trucks can easily modify one basic truck model for different but related purposes, such as transporting furniture, horses, or frozen food. Those different purposes can be fulfilled by making a few minor variations on the same basic design of the truck's cargo compartment, with little or no change in the motor, brakes, axles, and other major components. Similarly, an airplane manufacturer can with minor modifications use the same model of airplane to carry ordinary passengers, skydivers, or freight. But it is not feasible to convert a truck into an airplane, or vice versa, because a truck is committed to truckhood in too many respects: heavy body, diesel motor, braking system, axles, and so on. To build an airplane, one would not start with a truck and modify it, one would instead start all over again. Animals, in contrast, are not designed from scratch to provide an optimal solution for a desired lifestyle. Instead, they evolve from existing animal populations. Evolutionary changes in lifestyle come about incrementally through the accumulation of small changes in an evolutionary design adapted to a different but related lifestyle. An animal with many adaptations to one specialized lifestyle may not be able to evolve the many adaptations required for a different lifestyle, or may do so only after a very long time. For instance, a female mammal that gives birth to live young cannot evolve into a bird-like egg layer merely by extruding her embryo to the outside within a day of fertilization. She would have to have evolved bird-like mechanisms for synthesizing yolk, eggshell, and other avian commitments to egg-laying. Recall that, of the two main classes of warm-blooded vertebrates, birds and mammals, male parental care is the rule among birds and the exception among mammals. That difference results from birds and mammals' long evolutionary histories of developing different solutions to the problem of what to do with an egg that has just been fertilized internally. Each of those solutions has required a whole set of adaptations, which differ between birds and mammals, and to which all modern birds and mammals are now heavily committed. The bird solution is to have the female rapidly extrude the fertilized embryo, packaged with yolk inside a hard shell, in an extremely undeveloped and utterly helpless state that is impossible for anyone except an embryologist to recognize as a bird. From the moment of fertilization to the moment of extrusion, the embryo's development inside the mother lasts only a day, or a few days. That brief internal development is followed by a much longer period of development outside the mother's body, up to 80 days of incubation, before the egg hatches, and up to 240 days of feeding and caring for the hatched chick, until it can fly. Once the egg has been laid, there is nothing further in the chick's development that uniquely requires its mother's help. The father can sit on the egg and keep it warm just as well as the mother can. After hatching out, chicks of most bird species eat the same food as their parents, and the father can collect and bring that food to the nest as well as the mother can. In most bird species, the care of the nest, egg, and chick requires both parents. In those bird species in which the efforts of one parent suffice, that parent is more often the mother and the father, for the reasons discussed in Chapter 2. The female's greater obligate internal investment in the fertilized embryo, the greater opportunities foreclosed for the male by parental care, and the male's low confidence in paternity, as a result of internal fertilization. But in all bird species the female's obligate internal investment is much less than that in any mammal species, because the developing young bird is born laid in such an early stage of development compared to even the least developed newborn mammal. The ratio of development time outside the mother, a time of duties that in theory can be shared by the mother and the father, to development time inside the mother is much higher for birds and for mammals. No mother bird's pregnancy egg formation time approaches the 9 months of human pregnancy, or even the 12 days of the briefest mammalian pregnancy. Hence female birds are not as easily bluffed as female mammals into caring for the offspring, while the father deserts to philander. That has consequences for the evolutionary programming not only of birds' instinctive behaviors but also of their anatomy and physiology. In pigeons, which feed their young by secreting milk from their crops, both the father and the mother have evolved to secrete milk. Biparental care is the rule in birds, and while in those bird species that practice uniparental care the mother is usually the sole caretaker, in some bird species it is the father, a development unprecedented among mammals. Care by the father alone characterizes not only those bird species characterized by sex role reversal polyandry, but also some other birds, including ostriches, emus, and tinamous. The bird solution to the problems posed by internal fertilization and subsequent embryonic development involves specialized anatomy and physiology. Female but not male birds possess an oviduct of which one portion secretes albumin, the egg white protein, another portion makes the inner and outer shell membranes, and still another makes the eggshell itself. All of those hormonally regulated structures and their metabolic machinery represent evolutionary commitment. Birds must have been evolving along this pathway for a long time, because egg-laying was already widespread in ancestral reptiles, from which birds may have inherited much of their egg-making machinery. Creatures that are recognizably birds, and no longer reptiles, such as the famous Archaeopteryx, appear in the fossil record by 150 million years ago. While the reproductive biology of Archaeopteryx is unknown, A dinosaur fossil from about 80 million years ago has been found entombed on a nest and eggs, suggesting that birds inherited nesting behavior as well as egg-laying from their reptilian ancestors. Modern bird species vary greatly in their ecology and lifestyle, from aerial flyers to terrestrial runners and marine divers, from tiny hummingbirds to giant extinct elephant birds, and from penguins nesting in the Antarctic winter to toucans breeding in tropical rainforests. Despite that variation in lifestyle, all existing birds have remained committed to internal fertilization, egg-laying, incubation, and other distinctive features of avian reproductive biology, with only minor variations among species. The principal exceptions are the brush turkeys of Australia and the Pacific Islands. They incubate their eggs with external heat sources, such as fermentative, volcanic, or solar heat, rather than with body heat. If one were designing a bird from scratch, perhaps one could come up with a better but entirely different reproductive strategy, such as that of bats, which fly like birds but reproduce by pregnancy, live birth, and lactation. Whatever the virtues of that bat solution, it would require too many major changes for birds which remain committed to their own solution. Mammals have their own long history of evolutionary commitment to their solution to the same problem of what to do with an internally fertilized egg. The mammalian solution begins with pregnancy, an obligate period of embryonic development within the mother that lasts much longer than in any mother bird. Pregnancy's duration ranges from a minimum of 12 days in bandicoots to 22 months in elephants. That big initial commitment by a female mammal makes it impossible for her to bluff her way out of further commitment, and has led to the evolution of female lactation. Like birds, mammals have evidently been committed to their distinctive solution for a long time. Lactation does not leave fossil traces, but it is shared among the three living groups of mammals, monotremes, marsupials, and placentals, which had already differentiated from each other by 135 million years ago. Hence lactation presumably arose in some mammal, like reptilian ancestor, so-called therapsid reptiles, even earlier. Like birds, mammals are committed to much specialized reproductive anatomy and physiology of their own. Some of those specializations differ greatly between the three mammalian groups, such as placental development resulting in a relatively mature newborn in placental mammals, earlier birth, and relatively longer postnatal development in marsupials, and egg-laying in monotremes. These specializations have probably been in place for at least 135 million years. Compared to those differences between the three mammalian groups, or compared to the differences between all mammals and birds, variation within each of the three groups of mammals is minor. No mammal has re-evolved external fertilization, or discarded lactation. No marsupial or placental mammal has re-evolved egg-laying. Species differences in lactation are mere quantitative differences, more of this, less of that. For instance, the milk of Arctic seals is concentrated in nutrients, high in fat, and almost devoid of sugar, while human milk is more dilute in nutrients, sugary, and low in fat. Weaning from milk to solid food extends over a period of up to 4 years in traditional human hunter-gatherer societies. At the other extreme, guinea pigs and jackrabbits are capable of nibbling solid food within a few days of birth, and dispensing with milk soon thereafter. Guinea pigs and jackrabbits may be evolving in the direction of bird species with precocial young, such as chickens and shorebirds, whose hatchlings already have open eyes, can run, and can find their own food, but cannot yet fly, or fully regulate their own body temperature. Perhaps, if life on Earth survives the current onslaught by humans, the evolutionary descendants of guinea pigs and jackrabbits will discard their inherited evolutionary commitment to lactation in a few more tens of millions of years. Thus, other reproductive strategies might work for a mammal, and it would seem to require few mutations to transform a newborn guinea pig or jackrabbit into a newborn mammal. That requires no milk at all. But that has not happened. Mammals have remained evolutionarily committed to their characteristic reproductive strategy. Similarly, even though we have seen that male lactation is physiologically possible, and, although it also would seem to require few mutations, Female mammals have nevertheless had an enormous evolutionary head start on males in perfecting their shared physiological potential for lactation. Females, but not males, have been undergoing natural selection for milk production for tens of millions of years. In all the species I cited to demonstrate that male lactation is physiologically possible, humans, cows, goats, dogs, guinea pigs, and dyak fruit bats lactating males still produce much less milk than do females. Still, the tantalizing recent discoveries about dyak fruit bats make one wonder whether out there today, undiscovered, might be some mammal species whose males and females share the burden of lactation, or one that might evolve such sharing in the future. The life history of the dyak fruit bat remains virtually unknown, so we cannot say what conditions favored in it the beginnings of normal male lactation, nor how much milk, if any, the male bats actually supply to their offspring. Nevertheless, we can easily predict on theoretical grounds the conditions that would favor the evolution of normal male lactation. Those conditions include a litter of infants that constitute a big burden to nourish, monogamous male-female pairs, high confidence of males in their paternity, and hormonal preparation of fathers, while their mate is still pregnant, for eventual lactation. The mammal species that some of these conditions already best describe is the human species. Medical technology is making others of these conditions increasingly applicable to us with modern fertility drugs and high-tech methods of fertilization. Births of twins and triplets are becoming more frequent. Nursing human twins is such an energy drain that the daily energy budget of a mother of twins approaches that of a soldier in boot camp. Despite all our jokes about infidelity, genetic testing shows the great majority of American and European babies tested to have been actually sired by the mother's husband. Genetic testing of fetuses is becoming increasingly common, and can already permit a man to be virtually 100% sure that he really sired the fetus within his pregnant wife. Among animals, external fertilization favors, and internal fertilization mitigates against, the evolution of male parental investment. That fact has discouraged male parental investment by other mammal species, but now uniquely favors it in humans, because in vitro external fertilization techniques have become a reality for humans within the past 2 decades. Of course, the vast majority of the world's babies are still conceived internally by natural methods. But the increasing number of older women and men who wish to conceive but have difficulty doing so, and the reported modern decline in human fertility, if it is real, combine to ensure that more and more human babies will be products of external fertilization, like most fish and frogs. All these features make the human species a leading candidate for male lactation. While that candidacy may take millions of years to perfect through natural selection, we have it in our power to short-circuit that evolutionary process by technology. Some combination of manual nipple stimulation and hormone injections may soon develop the latent potential of the expectant father, his confidence in paternity buttressed by DNA testing, to make milk, without the need to await genetic changes. The potential advantages of male lactation are numerous. It would promote a type of emotional bonding of father to child now available only to women. Many men, in fact, are jealous of the special bond arising from breastfeeding, whose traditional restriction to mothers makes men feel excluded. Today, many or most mothers in first world societies have already become unavailable for breastfeeding, whether because of jobs, illness, or lactational failure. Yet not only parents but also babies derive many benefits from breastfeeding. Breastfed babies acquire stronger immune defenses, and are less susceptible to numerous diseases, including diarrhea, ear infections, early age-onset diabetes, influenza, necrotizing enterocolitis, and SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Male lactation could provide those benefits to babies, if the mother is unavailable for any reason. It must be acknowledged, however, that the obstacles to male lactation are not only physiological ones, which can evidently be overcome, but also psychological ones. Men have traditionally regarded breastfeeding as a woman's job, and the first men to breastfeed their infants will undoubtedly be ridiculed by many other men. Nevertheless, Human reproduction already involves increasing use of other procedures that would have seemed ridiculous until a few decades ago. Procedures such as external fertilization without intercourse, fertilization of women over the age of 50, gestation of one woman's fetus inside another woman's womb, and survival of prematurely delivered 1 kilogram fetuses by high-tech incubator methods. We now know that our evolutionary commitment to female lactation is physiologically labile. It may prove psychologically labile as well. Perhaps our greatest distinction as a species is our capacity, unique among animals, to make counter-evolutionary choices. Most of us choose to renounce murder, rape, and genocide, despite their advantages, as a means for transmitting our genes, and despite their widespread occurrence among other animal species and earlier human societies. Will male lactation become another such counter-evolutionary choice? Chapter 4. Wrong Time for Love. The Evolution of Recreational Sex. Section 1. First scene. A dimly lit bedroom, with a handsome man lying in bed. A beautiful young woman in a nightgown runs to the bed. A diamond wedding ring flashes virtuously on her left hand, while her right hand clutches a small blue strip of paper. She bends down and kisses the man's ear. Darling. It's exactly the right time. Next scene. Same bedroom, same couple, evidently making love, but details tastefully obscured by the dim lighting. Then the camera shifts to a calendar slowly being flipped, to indicate the passage of time, by a graceful hand wearing the same diamond wedding ring. Next scene. The same beautiful couple, blissfully holding a clean smiling baby. Darling. I'm so glad that Audiobook told us when it was exactly the right time. Last frame, close-up of the same graceful hand, clutching the small blue strip of paper. Caption reads, Audiobook. Home urine test to detect ovulation. If baboons could understand our TV ads, they'd find that one especially hilarious. Neither a male nor female baboon needs a hormonal test kit to detect the female's ovulation, the sole time when her ovary releases an egg, and when she can be fertilized. Instead, the skin around the female's vagina swells, and turns a bright red color visible at a distance. She also gives off a distinctive smell. In case a dumb male still misses the point, she crouches in front of him and presents her hindquarters. Most other female animals are equally aware of their own ovulation, and advertise it to males with equally bold visual signals, odors, or behaviors. We consider female baboons with bright red hindquarters bizarre. In fact, we humans are the ones whose scarcely detectable ovulations make us members of a small minority in the animal world. Men have no reliable means of detecting when their partners can be fertilized, nor did women in traditional societies. I grant that many women experience headaches or other sensations around the midpoint of a menstrual cycle. However, they wouldn't know that these are signs of ovulation if they hadn't been told so by scientists, and even scientists that didn't figure that out until around 1930. Similarly, women can be taught to detect ovulation by monitoring their body temperature or mucus, but that's very different from the instinctive knowledge possessed by female animals. If we too had such instinctive knowledge, manufacturers of ovulation test kits and contraceptives wouldn't be doing such a booming business. We're also bizarre in our nearly continuous practice of sex, a behavior that is a direct consequence of our concealed ovulations. Most other animal species confine sex to a brief estrus period around the advertised time of ovulation. The noun estrus and adjective estrus are derived from the Greek word for gadfly, an insect that pursues cattle and drives them into a frenzy. At estrus, a female baboon emerges from a month of sexual abstinence to copulate up to 100 times, while a female Barbary macaque does it on the average every 17 minutes, distributing her favors at least once to every adult male in her troop. Monogamous gibbon couples go several years without sex, until the female weans her most recent infant, and comes into estrus again. The gibbons relapse once more into abstinence as soon as the female becomes pregnant. We humans, though, practice sex on any day of the estrous cycle. Women solicit it on any day, and men perform without being choosy about whether their partner is fertile or ovulating. After decades of scientific inquiry, it isn't even certain at what stage in the cycle a woman is most interested in men's sexual advances, if indeed her interest shows any cyclical variation. Hence most human copulations involve women who are unable to conceive at that moment. Not only do we have sex at the wrong time of the cycle, but we continue to have sex during pregnancy and after menopause, when we know for sure that fertilization is impossible. Many of my New Guinea friends feel obliged to have regular sex right up to the end of pregnancy because they believe that repeated infusions of semen furnish the material to build the fetus's body. Human sex does seem a monumental waste of effort from a biological point of view, if one follows Catholic dogma in equating sex's biological function with fertilization. Why don't women give clear ovulatory signals, like most other female animals, so that we can restrict sex to moments when it could do us some good? This chapter seeks to understand the evolution of concealed ovulation, nearly constant female sexual receptivity, and recreational sex, a trinity of bizarre reproductive behaviors that is central to human sexuality. By now, you may have decided that I'm the prime example of an ivory tower scientist searching unnecessarily for problems to explain. I can hear several billion of the world's people protesting. There's no problem to explain, except why Jared Diamond is such an idiot. You don't understand why we have sex all the time. Because it's fun, of course. Unfortunately, that answer doesn't satisfy scientists. While animals are engaged in sex, they too look as if they're having fun, to judge by their intense involvement. Marsupial mice even seem to be having lots more fun than we do. If the duration of their copulations, up to 12 hours, is any indication, then why do most animals consider sex fun only when the female can be fertilized? Behavior evolves through natural selection, just as anatomy does. Hence, if sex is enjoyable, natural selection must have been responsible for that outcome. Yes, sex is fun for dogs too, but only at the right time. Dogs, like most other animals, have evolved the good sense to enjoy sex when it can do some good. Natural selection favors those individuals whose behavior lets them pass their genes to the most babies. How does it help you make more babies, if you are crazy enough to enjoy sex at a time when you couldn't possibly make a baby? A simple example illustrating the goal-directed nature of sexual activity in most animal species is provided by pied flycatchers, the bird species I discussed in Chapter 2. Normally, a female pied flycatcher solicits copulation only when her eggs are ready to be fertilized, a few days before laying. Once she begins egg-laying, her interest in sex vanishes, and she resists propositions from males, or behaves indifferently towards them. But in an experiment in which a team of ornithologists made 20 female pied flycatchers into widows after completion of egg-laying by removing their mates, 6 of the 20 experimental widows were seen to solicit copulation from new males within 2 days, 3 were seen actually to copulate, and more may have done so unobserved. Evidently, the females were attempting to trick the males into believing them to be fertile and available. When the eggs eventually hatched, the males would have no way of realizing that some other male had actually fathered the clutches. In at least a few cases, the trick worked, and the males proceeded to feed the hatchlings, as a biological father would have. There was thus not the slightest indication that any of the females was a merry widow, pursuing sex for mere pleasure. Since we humans are exceptional in our concealed ovulations, unceasing receptivity, and recreational sex, it can only be because we evolved to be that way. It's especially paradoxical that in Homo sapiens, the species unique in its self-consciousness, females should be unconscious of their own ovulation, when female animals as dumb as cows are aware of it. Something special was required to conceal ovulation from a female as smart and aware as a woman. As we'll discover, it has proven unexpectedly difficult for scientists to figure out what that special something was. Chapter 4. Wrong Time for Love. The Evolution of Recreational Sex. Section 2. There's a simple reason why most other animals are sensibly stingy about copulatory effort. Sex is costly in energy, time, and risk of injury or death. Let me count the reasons why you should not love your beloved unnecessarily. 1. Sperm production is sufficiently costly for males that worms with a mutation that reduces sperm production live longer than normal worms. 2. Sex takes time that could otherwise be devoted to finding food. 3. Couples locked in embrace risk being surprised and killed by a predator or enemy. 4. Older individuals may succumb to the strain of sex. France's Emperor Napoleon III suffered a stroke while engaged in the act, and Nelson Rockefeller died during sex. 5. Fights between male animals competing for an estrus female often result in serious injury to the female as well as to the males. 6. Being caught at extramarital sex is risky for many animal species, including, most notoriously, humans. Thus, we would reap a big advantage by being as sexually efficient as other animals. What compensating advantage do we get from our apparent inefficiency? Scientific speculation tends to center on another of our unusual features. The helpless condition of human infants makes lots of parental care necessary for many years. The young of most mammals start to get their own food as soon as they're weaned. They become fully independent soon afterwards. Hence most female mammals can and rear their young with no assistance from the father, whom the mother sees only to copulate. For humans, though, most food is acquired by complex technologies far beyond the dexterity or mental ability of a toddler. As a result, our children have to have food brought to them for at least a decade after weaning, and that job is much easier for two parents than for one. Even today it's hard for the single human mother to rear kids unassisted, and it used to be much harder in prehistoric days, when we were hunter-gatherers. Now consider the dilemma facing an ovulating cave woman who has just been fertilized. In any other mammal species, the male who did it would promptly go off in search of another ovulating female to fertilize. For the cave woman, though, the male's departure would expose her eventual child to the likelihood of starvation or murder. What can she do to keep that man? Her brilliant solution: remain sexually receptive even after ovulating. Keep him satisfied by copulating whenever he wants. In that way, he'll hang around, have no need to look for new sex partners, and will even share his daily hunting bag of moat. Recreational sex is thus supposed to function as the glue holding a human couple together while they cooperate in rearing their helpless baby. That in essence is the theory formally accepted by anthropologists, and it seemed to have much to recommend it. However, as we have learned more about animal behavior, we have come to realize that this sex to promote family values theory leaves many questions unanswered. Chimpanzees and especially bonobos have sex even more often than we do, as much as several times daily, yet they are promiscuous and have no pair bond to maintain. Conversely, one can point to males of numerous mammal species that require no such sexual bribes to induce them to remain with their mate and offspring. Gibbons, which actually often live as monogamous couples, go years without sex. You can watch outside your window how male songbirds cooperate assiduously with their mates in feeding the nestlings, although sex ceased after fertilization. Even male gorillas with a harem of several females got only a few sexual opportunities each year. Their mates are usually nursing or out of estrus. Why do women have to offer the sop of constant sex when these other females don't? There's a crucial difference between our human couples and those abstinent couples of other animal species. Gibbons, most songbirds, and gorillas live dispersed over the landscape, with each couple, or harem, occupying its separate territory. That pattern provides few encounters with potential extramarital sex partners. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of traditional human society is that mated couples live within large groups of other couples with whom they have to cooperate economically. To find an animal with parallel living arrangements, one has to go far beyond our mammalian relatives to densely packed colonies of nesting seabirds. Even seabird couples, though, aren't as dependent on each other economically as we are. The human sexual dilemma, then, is that a father and mother must work together for years to rear their helpless children, despite being frequently tempted by other fertile adults nearby. The specter of marital disruption by extramarital sex, with its potentially disastrous consequences for parental cooperation in child-rearing, is pervasive in human societies. Somehow, we evolved concealed ovulation and constant receptivity to make possible our unique combination of marriage, co-parenting, and adulterous temptation. How does it all fit together? Scientists' belated appreciation of these paradoxes has spawned an avalanche of competing theories, each of which tends to reflect the gender of its author. For instance, there's the prostitution theory proposed by a male scientist: women evolved to trade sexual favors for donations of meat from male hunters. There's also a male scientist's better genes through cuckoldry theory, which reasons that a cave woman with the misfortune to have been married off by her clan to an ineffectual husband could use her constant receptivity to attract and be extramaritally impregnated by a neighboring caveman with superior genes. Then again, there's the anti-contraceptive theory proposed by a woman scientist who was well aware that childbirth is uniquely painful and dangerous in the human species because of the large size of the newborn human infant relative to its mother, as compared to that ratio in our ape relatives. A 100-pound woman typically gives birth to a 6-pound infant, while a female gorilla twice that size, 200 pounds, gives birth to an infant only half as large, 3 pounds. As a result, human mothers often died in childbirth before the advent of modern medical care, and women are still attended at birth by helpers, obstetricians, and nurses in modern first-world societies, midwives, or older women in traditional societies, whereas female gorillas give birth unattended, and have never been recorded as dying in childbirth. Hence, according to the anti-contraceptive theory, cave women aware of the pain and danger of childbirth, and also aware of their day of ovulation, misused that knowledge to avoid sex then. Such women failed to pass on their genes, leaving the world populated by women ignorant of their time of ovulation, and thus unable to avoid having sex while fertile. From this plethora of hypotheses to explain concealed ovulation, to which I shall refer to as the daddy-at-home theory, and the many fathers theory, have survived as most plausible. Interestingly, the two hypotheses are virtually opposite. The daddy-at-home theory posits that concealed ovulation evolved to promote monogamy, to force the man to stay home, and thus to bolster his certainty about his paternity of his wife's children. The many fathers theory instead posits that concealed ovulation evolved to give the woman access to many sex partners, and thus to leave many men uncertain as to whether they sired her children. Take first the daddy-at-home theory, developed by the biologists Richard Alexander and Catherine Noonan of the University of Michigan. To understand their theory, imagine what married life would be like if women did advertise their ovulations like female baboons with bright red derrieres. A husband would infallibly recognize, from the color of his wife's derriere, the day on which she was ovulating. On that day he would stay home and assiduously make love in order to fertilize her and pass on his genes. On all other days, he would realize from his wife's pallid derriere that lovemaking with her was useless. He would instead wander off in search of other, unguarded, red-hued ladies, so that he could fertilize them too, and pass on even more of his genes. He'd feel secure in leaving his wife at home then, because he'd know that she wasn't sexually receptive to men, and couldn't be fertilized anyway. That's what male geese, seagulls, and pied flycatchers actually do. For humans, the results of those marriages with advertised ovulations would be awful. Fathers would rarely be at home, mothers would be unable to rear kids unassisted, and babies would die in droves. That would be bad for both mothers and fathers because neither would succeed in propagating their genes. Now let's picture the reverse scenario, in which a husband has no clue to his wife's fertile days. He then has to stay at home and make love with her on as many days of the month as possible if he wants to have much chance of fertilizing her. Another motive for him to stay at home is to guard